you and your business studio. Hiya, Jim.
Thank you, Alec. Really delighted to be here. It's wonderful.
I'll tell you, you're a busy man. But let me take you back to your last year in school.
Yeah.
As I like to do it all the guests, where were you heading? What was on your mind?
Well, I was at that point probably thinking about doing medicine or dentistry, believe it or not, influenced by an uncle. A totally wrong choice, by the way. I mean, I just can't abide by the sight of blood. I mean, anybody who knows me well will tell you that. So, I was wrongly influenced, I think, but I was lucky on the day of my physics exam, which I needed to get into dentistry. I had a strep throat, and so I underperformed. I got a D and needed a C to get into Trinity. And wow, I wasn't able to do dentistry. Simultaneously, I had applied for a position in the Bank of Ireland.
All right.
And to be honest, I didn't even think about it until I was over in Europe, and I got a letter. And in those days, this was 1973. My dad actually sent me a letter from Dublin to keep in contact with me. I was in Austria somewhere, and I opened this what do they used to call it, express mail or something like that, letter. I was really excited to get a letter. And my dad said, sorry, for the dentistry, for the medicine, but well done, son. You've got an interview with the Bank of Ireland when you get home. And as they say, the rest is history, because I got the job and I joined the bank.
Wow, I mean, they say God works in mysterious ways. He certainly was in this one.
God works in mysterious ways, yeah, without a doubt. Because I would have flunked medicine or dentistry without a doubt. I would never have got through it.
Well, your aversion to blood certainly wouldn't have helped you in either of those careers. But moving on to the bank, a less blood-filled occupation. So, of course, that was a great job to be getting, safe, secure, pensionable for life.
In those days, it was, yeah.
Yeah. So where were you lured into? Did you get into branch work, or were you taken into head office?
Well, it was kind of pseudo head office, because it was a department which existed in those days called the Income Tax Department. Now, just to explain to people what that actually was, it was a department that provided tax services to bank customers, and they'd pay fees to have their various tax returns done, stuff like that. And so it sounds like a terrible job to get. Right. At least some people would see it as that. But in fact, it was a wonderful opportunity for a young fella like me, an 18-year-old, because I was thrown in the deep end, and I had a portfolio of clients, 200 clients, nearly a month into this job. Now, I will acknowledge that they weren't the most complicated clients, but nonetheless, I would be picking up the phone, or I would be writing letters to clients. I would be having face-to-face meetings when they would come in. So as an 18-year-old, I was thrown in the deep end into that kind of stuff. And it was a case of either sink or swim. And thankfully, I swam. But it taught me so much about the importance of looking after customers, really being nice to people, helping people, supporting people. And that was the foundation, in some respects, for my future career.
Wow. You must have, I mean, again, to be thrown in there, you must have had some good mentors around you to kind of help you there.
Oh, I mean, I really did. I mean, and I would say this all the way through my career in the bank. I was incredibly lucky to have bosses who weren't just focused on themselves, who actually went out of their way to help and to develop the guys that were reporting to them. But I would have to say, and this has been my experience, if you try really hard and you've got a decent boss, he or she is going to help you, So I think it's a two-way street. It's a relationship. But you have to be lucky. You can have some terrible bosses out there. I mean, we all know that. So I was really lucky. I went to college then as a night student, and that was very challenging.
Right.
So as a 19-year-old, I went to UCD to do a BCom. Wow. 4 nights a week, Saturday morning. So on top of your work. So, but that was fine. I mean, I kind of saw where I was going. And then I was also lucky, the bank in those days weren't able to hire graduates. I mean, people today will probably go, "What? That doesn't make any sense." But that was the reality. The relationship with the union was very strong back then. I don't think it's quite as strong today. But so I won a sort of a race, I suppose, to get a scholarship to go to college for my final year. So I was a professional student for the final year of my BCom, getting paid to study. Of course, I had to perform.
Yeah.
And I did reasonably well. I got a 2-1, and they were happy with that. But for my sins, I ended up in the HR department.
All right, the HR department. And again, I suppose the HR department back in those days was a completely different animal to what we understand today.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because I've kind of come full circle. I'm involved in talking to organizations about well-being, and most of the time I'm rubbing shoulders with people in HR, and they kind of look at me and kind of say, I can read their body language saying, he couldn't be telling the truth. He has to be making this up. But the reality is, back in the mid 70s, which is when I joined the HR department, the Bank of Ireland was an extraordinarily progressive organization. It had a
Right.
medical department, it had a sports and social department. It really looked after its employees. It had a home-based training and development department. And so it did a lot of really good things and looked after the well-being of employees. I think that deteriorated then over the following, certainly into the late 90s and the noughties, as they were taking trying to get cost out of their business model, and now I think they've suffered as a result, and so now well-being is back on the agenda.
Right. Yeah, so it's done full circle, a full 360 on it, yeah.
It kind of has, but in my view, the best organizations never ever left the well-being of their key employees behind. And it's something that has always stuck with me. And then as I moved on in my career, which I know we'll come to, where I had my own employees. And so it was so important to me to really look after and nurture them, especially if they're performing. I mean, if they're not performing, that's a separate issue.
Yes, of course. But I mean, the seeds were being sown in those early days in the bank. And of course, they immersed you in a number of projects. They seem to obviously like your academic sort of mindset, but were quite prepared to throw you into projects as well.
Yeah, and again, I give a lot of credit for that to my bosses, but I always tried incredibly hard to perform at the best that I could. So I would be looking over my shoulder at colleagues and going, okay, so that's as much as they're prepared to do. So I'd come in early at the morning, I'd be at my desk at 7:30, and the HR director would walk in usually after me. And so he got a sense that, okay, I don't know what he's doing, but this guy is seriously committed to what we're about. But I was seriously committed, and I got involved in things. And when I got involved in them, I worked really hard, tried to produce good quality work. And so, I mean, it's a two-way street, as they say, but I really was conscientious and hardworking and committed. The bank,
sure.
My pals will tell you that I just ate, drank, and slept the bank. I was always defending the bank, in a pub, for example, and or with staff, people would be giving out about the bank in the pub on a Friday evening, and I'd be there defending it.
So they were always giving out about the bank, and most of these people didn't even have accounts in the bank, if I remember going back to those days.
I know.
But also some of the key mentors you had died of heart attacks, and that was to have some sort of a knock-on sort of implication for your life following on, which we'll come to later. But
it really did. And before I talk about them, my dad died at 47 from a massive heart attack. My uncle, who was a couple of years older than my dad, died, I think, within 2 years of my dad of a massive heart attack.
Wow.
The HR director died from a massive heart attack when I was in the UK, and maybe we'll come back to that particular issue. And then his replacement also died of a massive heart attack while I was in the UK. So that was an extraordinary, coincidence that some of the most important and influential people in my life died from a massive heart attack. So it's hardly a surprise. that I am very much into health and lifestyle,
Yeah.
and that kind of helps to explain it.
Yeah, and certainly, there was enough around you to influence you to move in that direction. But you were in London, and the bank wasn't going to be always your career. You had other ambitions.
Well, I think what's interesting about London, I was asked to go to London, and I had only been appointed within 2 years to be the HR manager for Area East. So I had a really good job here in Dublin, but they obviously saw something in me as a guy who could actually fit into the city, and a HR role in the city. So it was a wonderful opportunity to go to the city and to be exposed to international banks and financial institutions and to compete. I mean, one of the most difficult things I ever had to do was to try and hire really good people in the city of London in the in the second half of the 80s. Being an Irish bank, that was a tall order, but
Sure.
maybe that's another conversation. But I was out of sight, out of mind when I left Dublin to go to London. And I just said to you that two of my my main mentors died. So not only was I out of sight and out of mind, but the two most influential people in my career to that point of time were gone. And so when I came back to Dublin in early 1989, my wife Maureen had our first baby, Megan, and we didn't want to have her grow up in London. So we said, can we go back? And of course, the bank was wonderful, facilitated that, but there was no senior job in HR. There was no job for me. And so, but I was given a choice of about 3 or 4 things. I chose corporate banking as a place, and I tried it for 9 months, but it wasn't for me. Now I had a plan B, which was to set up my own business, and probably that whole occurrence of coming back, going into corporate banking, not really enjoying my time there. And so I decided to leave the bank and set up my own business. And it's hardly a surprise that I would pick HR consulting, and my target audience would be financial services organizations.
Yeah, it was a natural fit for you. Yeah.
And of course, the IFSC was in its infancy at that point, and I didn't know what was going to happen or what was coming down the track, but I had a sense that it was going to be a growth story. And as we all know, it turned out to be a phenomenal story for Ireland.
Yes, it was, as you said, and things happened for a particular reason. We discussed that earlier. So suddenly you found yourself, I suppose, involved in recruitment and HR, but mainly dealing with foreign banks who wish to establish themselves down at the IFSC.
That's about it. And what was interesting is that these institutions that may now have hundreds of employees all started with a handful of employees, and they could never really justify appointing a HR person. So the Irish management team were always dealing with somebody in London or New York or wherever that organization was based, and they needed local knowledge. They needed local expertise. So whether that was about things like recruitment, selection, remuneration, performance management, employment law, there were a whole bunch of different services that they needed. And in those early days, they outsourced it. I mean, and as they grew and became very successful, I was out of a job, kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it was. But you were a perfect fit in terms of a banking background, plus also your specialized knowledge around HR and recruitment, which would have been fantastic.
Yeah.
And so you managed to build your own business. How long were you running that for?
I did that for 12 years, and it was largely very successful. And it enabled me to have freedoms. One of the sort of directions I went in outside of work was that I was really interested in marathon running, and that sort of morphed into triathlon way ahead of my time. And but it was all kind of going back to the heart disease issue and wanting to be healthy and have a really active lifestyle. And so that became my true passion in life. Meanwhile, in early I think it was 2001, if I can recall, there was a mini crash, and it had a negative impact, especially in the recruitment market.
Sure.
Organizations stopped recruiting. And I had beefed up my team to, thinking it was onwards and upwards. And, I had brought in 5 or 6 people in the previous two years. And I found myself having to let them go in probably late 2001, maybe early 2002.
Wow.
And that actually broke my heart, to be honest with you. I found that really difficult. I didn't like it at all. And yeah, I mean, what more can you say?
No, and it's a tough part of business. And I mean, if you're going to be running a business, unfortunately, these are the tough decisions to have to make. And I think people fail to understand that they do have an impact on you.
Yeah, without a doubt. And it probably then influenced my decision to do something new. I'd said, okay, I've reached this sort of position. I was 48 at the time. I had always said that when I got to 50, I was going to do something that I really wanted to do, which was in the triathlon and health and wellness space. And so, to cut a long story short, I decided I was going to shut down my HR business and I was going to open up another business.
Right.
And I looked at a lot of different places. I don't want to make this sound frivolous. It wasn't. There was a huge amount of research and thought gone into this. I considered Spain. I went over to Spain. I considered Portugal. I considered South Africa, Australia. And then I learned that it was possible to get into the US on a particular type of visa called an E2 investor visa.
Right.
And so I explored that. I had to hire a lawyer, an immigration lawyer, I think they're called, which cost somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. But essentially, I had somebody holding my hand with my E2 investor visa. And I got the visa, and one of the requirements, I mean, I say this to people just to show that this was really serious for me. I had to put $500,000 on the table in order to get that visa. And they make it absolutely clear that that money is at risk. And what that means is that they don't give you the visa until you have actually spent that amount of money. And so I was in America, I was trying to develop the business, I was spending money, trying to figure out what I was going to do precisely, and always running the risk that they could pull the plug and say no when the time came to, are we going to let this guy forward? But thankfully they did. And I opened a new business in 2004 in a town called Mount Pleasant, which is a suburb of Charleston, a beautiful spot, beautiful area in South Carolina.
Tell me this, Jim. You didn't go to the UK, and you would have had experience of the UK. What was the thinking behind that took you to the States rather than the UK?
That's a good question. And it's a really simple answer. You'll have maybe noticed that in the countries that I spoke about, they're all good weather countries.
Yeah.
If you think about, and I ended up in South Carolina where the weather is really good. I kind of decided, especially given the sport that I was doing, triathlon. In Ireland, triathlon was a 4-month-a-year sport. Right. So opening up a business in Ireland and thus the UK, because it would be broadly the same, didn't make any sense at all. And there was no online business at that point, and certainly nothing worth talking about. So really Ireland and the UK were off the table as far as I was concerned. So it had to be a 12-month-a-year marketplace. And so, Australia, South Africa, Spain, Portugal, South Carolina, all ticked the box. So it really was as simple as that.
All right. Well, that makes common sense, I suppose, really, to do that. Yeah. And you managed to build this business up. And I suppose one of the things that helps people, and they tend to forget about it, is that when you have a passion for something and you're really into it, that enthusiasm, you never really work. You enjoy building that business.
Yeah. And so I was, I was bringing to the table my passion for health, for well-being, for fitness, for customer service. And so people will often ask me, why in the name of God did you go into retail. I didn't see myself going into a retail business, even though it was a retail business. It was a specialty sports store helping people to try the sports of walking, running, swimming, cycling, fitness, and maybe a triathlon. But so it was a lifestyle business in some respects, no different to what I'm doing now. It is different, but the fundamentals were the same. We wanted to add value to people's lives, and what we were doing was doing it through the sale of products and services which were going to help people. And in order to get to the point where you could do that, you had to have really high quality people. They needed to know what they were doing. They needed likewise to have a passion for whether it was running or triathlon. So all of the people that I engaged were people who were as passionate as I was about those sports. They were highly qualified people. Maybe they were coaches in running or in triathlon or whatever it would be. And they were really excited about the prospect of coming to work in Tri Sports in my store or our store because of what we were doing, which, to be honest with you, was years ahead of what the competition was doing.
What you're talking about here, instilling a culture within your own organization, and that was to be recognized then in terms of awards you got for your stores.
It was. I mean, people again they look at me and want, come on, Jim, how could you have done that? So we opened our second store in 2006 in Charlotte, North Carolina. And these were essentially two relatively small stores, 2,500 square feet. And there's an annual award, at least there was at that time, that Runner's World, which would be the biggest running magazine in the world. And they would have the specialty sports awards nominated by the customers of the stores. And we came second and third in the nation. I can't remember who beat us at this stage, but for an Irish guy to come to America and within 2-3 years of opening up a business to have the two stores recognized as doing wonderful things in the customer service area was pretty spectacular, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, and credit where credit's due. People tend to forget that actually running business is not that difficult once you have the passion and the right people around you to make it happen.
Correct. Yeah.
And
there are lots of other factors as I will explain maybe as we go along. So while the early years were wonderful, it wasn't all good as the story unfolds.
No, it wasn't. But I mean, we won't dwell on that because we're believe it or not, we're flying through the show here. And we've only about another 6 minutes or so to go. I kind of want to take you from, you mentioned also about the influence of those mentors of yours having, those heart attacks and how this has taken you probably to where you were in that particular world of business.
Well, I found myself very quickly being asked to speak as the sort of the boss of Tri Sports. And I was usually speaking to people who maybe had an interest. And so I got involved in what effectively was called the Healthy Charleston Challenge, which would be like Operation Transformation here. Right. And so I was dealing with overweight, obese people. And it was a horrendous story in America. And it totally opened my eyes. I wasn't aware of these people because I wasn't dealing with them. Our customers were healthy people. But 80% of the American population were unhealthy. And so all of a sudden I said, I need to do something about this. It's all very well helping people who are already healthy and passionate about it, but I needed to focus on the 80%. And so I spent the next 3 years sort of focused on that. So whether it was speaking, I wrote my book, which is called The Exercise Factor. But in hindsight, that was a bad title. I should have picked something else. But the tagline of the book was ease into the best shape of your life, regardless of your age, your weight, or your current fitness level. And so that spoke to the 80% of people who maybe were living in despair because they didn't know what to do, or the fact that they actually had power to take control of their own life, their own health, and do something about it.
Yes, and also that sort of theme, which sort of resonated with so many people, gave you access to sort of the general media in the States as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. An Irish guy had no difficulty, and maybe it was to do with the track record, to be fair, but
Mm.
I had no trouble getting onto major TV networks in America. I was on radio every other week. I was the go-to guy in Charleston, South Carolina, around, we had a major race called the Cooper River Bridge Run, and so I was regularly on TV. I mean, I haven't been on TV since I've come back to Ireland,
Maybe.
but I think the thing that was missing, see, in America, I was Irish and I
Mm,
had this wonderful accent.
mm.
Whereas over here, I'm a nobody in that sense. If that
Oh,
makes
you're one of 5 million with an Irish accent, so you don't stand
yeah,
out.
so I don't stand out. But you wouldn't believe how they used to love the accent. I mean, it was extraordinary.
But let's move this on to back here, because as I said, with just a few minutes to show left, I want to
Yeah,
understand what you're doing here. This Forever Young Club. Tell us more about this, and your
yeah.
passion around it and who it's aimed at.
Well, of course, I'm now, 65 going on 66, Alec. So,
Mm.
I moved into a new part of my life, I suppose. And the Forever Young Club is for people who are 50 and over. And our mission is to help and empower those people to develop an active, healthy, sustainable lifestyle so they can achieve their goals and dreams. In other words, that this final, maybe third of their life is going to be a time, a period of great fulfillment and enjoyment. But it requires people to take control of their health insofar as they can. I mean, there are only so many things that you can do, but
Sure.
there are a lot of things that you can do, and you can be proactive. And so we're here to facilitate that process. That's what the Forever Young Club is ultimately about. So we launched a pilot study a couple of weeks back on the 16th of February. We've had about 680, 700 people sign up for
Wow.
the
Yeah.
pilot study, which, that's really good, but it's always difficult to know how many of those people are truly interested in the Forever Young Club, or are they flies on the wall who are just curious onlookers. Time will tell, and that's what the pilot study, in a sense, is designed to do, is to get our data. We launched a 30-day moving challenge last Saturday, and it's not too late for people to join in on that if they have an interest in it. And so all of this, by the way, is totally free. But what we're trying to do is to develop information and data which will enable us make a decision at the end of the pilot study as to how we move forward. I mean, we're planning to move forward regardless, but hopefully we will now be armed with useful and helpful information which will allow us to sort of tweak the business and figure out what people want as distinct from what we think they want. And because that's a mistake I've made in the past.
I think we all make it in business. But I mean, you talked about having sort of like the forerunner of the programs that they have on television here in terms of Operation Transformation. So,
Yeah.
I mean, this is sort of newly building on something you've done many, many years ago, but encouraging the right sort of people to get involved.
Yeah, and one of the really key things that we want to do is to enable people. So to do that, we need to give people accurate, reliable, science-based information they can trust, so that then they can make good decisions about what they need to do moving forward, because there's a lot of confusing information out there. So our plan is to bring experts in different areas, whether it's mental health, physical health, nutrition, physical activity, very important, mindset. Those are our 5 core topics, and to help people make good decisions so that they can decide what they're going to do with the rest of their life. And hopefully we can be a part of that journey. We call it the Forever Young Journey.
And for those, Jim, as I just wrap up the show, where can they find out more about this?
Well, it's a partnership between Pat Falvey, the well-known explorer, and me. So the best place to go is patfalvey.com, and then click on the Forever Young Club button, which you'll see on the home page, and that'll bring you to a dedicated Forever Young Club pilot study and challenge web pages, if you like, and everything you need to know is there. But sign up, it's free. And and I'll say to your listeners, if they want to make contact with me, please do. So my email address is jimkerwin at ynlm.ie, or if they prefer, jim@patfalvey.com. 2 email addresses, and they can choose whichever one they prefer.
Listen, thanks very much for that, Jim. A great way to finish the show and coming into the right time of the year for a lot of people, maybe to make those important decisions, and hopefully as we come out of COVID. A special thanks to our guest today, Jim Kirwin, for coming into the You and Your Business